And welcome back to another episode of the Reid Option Podcast. I am your host, Jordan Reid. My buddy Drae Harris is back. We only get him once a week, so I always cherish when Drae is here to give us his insight. I'm at the beach. Apologize if there is some pelicans or some bird noises in the background or some tidal waves you hear in the background. So I apologize about that.
Jordan, so before we get started, man, tell me what things are like over at the beach, man, because here in Phoenix, man, it feels like it's about 200 degrees outside. So tell me what's life like at the beach currently.
So it's not as hot, of course, just because on the East Coast, things don't get as blazing hot as it does over there. It actually rained all day today, unfortunately, but on vacation, that's the risk you take coming to the beach. But it was unusually crowded. Like a lot of people were here for whatever reason. We couldn't really figure out why, but girls got out. They had a good time. It's the second time going to the beach, so dumping hair in their sand, dumping sand all in the hair, and eating the sand, dealing with all that stuff, man. So, how you doing, man? How's everything going with you?
I'm doing well, man. Trying to survive this heat, man. It's been 215 degrees in Phoenix, it feels like, but all is well, man. I got my two boys here, so we hanging, man.
How is that? Like, is it highways melting and all that stuff over there?
Man, it's not quite that hot, but just from being able to live in certain states, man. I, of course, lived in Canada. I lived in the Bay Area, lived in Chicago, lived in Charlotte for a little while. I mean, if you go someplace else, like you come back, you ask yourself, man, how did I grow up here and run track every year in the summer and play football since I was 8 every single year? I mean, it's hot, man. Make no mistake.
This is just like your football game, man. You just been everywhere and playing all over the field. Right? I love it, man. Nipple, little safety, little outside corner. That's why I got you on the podcast, man. I love it. But one thing I did want to run by you, and I didn't put this in the show notes. I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to it or not. Okay. Have you seen this NHL expansion draft that's coming up for this team called the Seattle Kraken? It's a new team.
Seattle what? I'm sorry.
Seattle Kraken. That's their name.
I have not.
So I don't really remember how it worked with the Houston Texans. I know they had the number 1 overall pick, but you're on vacation, you get to read all this stuff on these different websites and how these silly articles are coming out about certain guys. But I've stumbled upon this NHL expansion draft, and I really got deep into it. So what works is, and I'm not a huge hockey fan. I've been to a couple of Carolina Hurricanes games here and there over the years, but I really went the whole looking at these expansion draft rules and how it's working is that. So I think the draft is the 21st. So I think next week sometime, this week coming up, and they get to pick one player from each team. So each team gets to protect like a certain amount of people, I believe it is, but they get to pick one person from each team. So I thought that was pretty unique in a sense. And I think each team gets to protect like 7 players. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. So I thought that was really unique, but I wanted to ask you a question. So if you're starting a franchise and you can pick one non-quarterback from any team that's not protected, who would be your 2 guys? So any other position besides, who would you start your team with?
So are you asking about a particular player or a particular position?
Just so you're a GM, you got a blank slate. You could pick any position except quarterback to start your team with. Who would your 2 guys be? Any position besides quarterback.
Oh, cool. I think you have to go your left tackle for sure, and then maybe a dominant pass rusher or corner. I think those 2 are probably a little bit of a toss-up. I kind of lean toward pass rusher, but my first pick would probably be a left tackle.
So the 2 people that I wrote down was David Bakhtiari and Jalen Ramsey. But I said, how can I pass up Aaron Donald? Even though he doesn't play a premium position, it's just, I don't know, man. I think Aaron Donald has to be in there just because of how dominant he is. We're talking about a player that I think is arguably the best of his position already and one of the best defensive players all time. I know what I'm getting in him. So it's like, I got to include him in there somehow, even though he doesn't play a premium position.
He has for sure. He has redefined what a an interior defensive lineman who is dominant actually looks like, man. I mean, his pressure, man, he creates so much pressure up the middle and causes havoc for quarterbacks. I mean, I think you can't go wrong choosing Aaron. I mean, but I think if it's any other player besides him, I may have to stay with the left tackle, pass rusher, and corner. I mean, but like I agree with you, it's hard to pass up a guy like AD, man. I mean, he is arguably the best to play his position, man. I mean, and yeah, man, it's a hard guy to pass up for sure.
For sure, yeah. I went down that rabbit hole a little bit. I just wanted to, throw you off track a little bit with
good.
The NHL expansion and draft. But, the basis of today's episode is summer scouting, of course. Quarterbacks out of the way. If you guys missed that episode, me, Brentley, and Dre, we went through plenty of quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, Malik Willis, and then the latter part of the week we touched on Carson Strong and then some other guys as well. So if you missed that episode, make sure to go back and check that out. But we're moving on to our next position. We're going through running backs today, and we're only going to debate two just because me and Dre have actually watched both of these guys. I actually watched them back to back. Dre watched them last week as well, and that's Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M and then also Breece Hall from Iowa State. Two players at the position that are probably getting the most buzz of any right now, and I want to spend a great amount of time on these guys just because I think they're unique in their own way. And I want you to go first, Dre, just because I've already heard we've already talked about Breece Hall a little bit in our scouting meetings, but I haven't heard your thoughts on Isaiah Spiller. So what was just your initial impression of him, and then strengths, weaknesses, and then some things you want to see grow in his game going into next season?
Sure. So I actually had the privilege of seeing him not too long ago. I mean, a few of the things you like, he's a 17-game starter. I thought he was highly effective from tackle to tackle and runs with a certain level of physicality, strong base. I thought he was an instinctive runner with vision and good feel for cutback lanes and being able to cut against the weak arm of a defender. A few of the issues that I had with him are the ball security issues. He put it on the turf both against Tennessee and Auburn. Would love to see him more effective on third downs in the passing game because it is starting to be more of a passing league. So his prowess on third downs and on passing downs may limit what his ceiling can be. I question his ability to get to the perimeter against athletic edge defenders in the National Football League. He's not an overly elusive player in space, but he's certainly someone who has value on first and second down, in particular between the tackles. So great footwork, great vision, really good instincts, but I really would like to see him become more effective this coming up season on passing downs and the ball security aspect as well.
I got kind of a David Montgomery vibe from him. Would you agree with that comparison?
It's a great comp.
Kind of, short area quickness is pretty good. Not really sudden as far as getting to the edge really quickly. Really good between the tackles, but outside runs he does struggle a little bit just because he didn't in the corner a whole bunch. I don't think his hands are as good as David Montgomery's coming out. I think David Montgomery is more involved in the passing game as well. I don't think Spiller right now is very comfortable in the passing game just because I think he catches the ball a lot with his forearms and his chest, which shows a player that isn't really confident in his hands, but I think he does have some room to grow in that aspect. And I'm right there with you with the ball security issues. I have him down for fumbles against Florida, Auburn, and then also Tennessee as well, even though he was really good in that Florida game. He just took over in the latter parts of that. I watched 5 games on him total. So I watched him against Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Mississippi State, and then also South Carolina. But Floyd, the way he finishes runs, I think that's something that I do have to give him a lot of credit for. I love the way that he just refuses to go out of bounds. You see him dipping that shoulder once he gets towards the sideline. And he just has that mentality that he wants to finish every run, really good at getting those hidden yardage between the tackles. He can get a little bit too aggressive and reckless at times, looking for or seeking contact as opposed to just getting what's there from time to time with him. So I want to see him get a little bit better in that aspect. I love his footwork. That's one thing I do love about him. His feet are always churning and they're active. And he's really good in the phone booth as far as getting those hidden yardage. Like I said, I think I wrote down acceptable speed. I think he has enough to succeed in the NFL, but it's not a situation of where he's going to reel off those 50, 60-yard runs consistently. He can get them here and there, but as far as, getting those chunk plays 2-3 times a game, he's just not going to be able to consistently do that. But I think he is a very highly effective runner. It's just I want to see him clean up the ball security. I love the vision. I love the short area quickness. But I just don't think he's going to have that ability to reel off those chunk plays consistently.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in the league, I think the thing that is really important is the stat that will always be a prominent one is if you win the turnover battle, you typically win the game. And so if he can't afford to take care of the football, then teams are going to say that they can't afford to give him the ball. So his ball security is something that we'll definitely have to watch this upcoming season, because it definitely could hinder his ceiling in the National Football League.
Absolutely. And I meant to ask you this before we started. Were you in KC when Kareem Hunt, when you guys drafted Kareem Hunt? Were you there?
That's a good. I think Kareem came the year after. I think I'm drawing a blank, but yeah, I think Kareem came the following year when I worked in Cleveland.
Because he's like the prototype of what everybody looks for in the position now, that maybe not have, whenever you're talking about a back that doesn't necessarily have that home run hitting speed, he has the quote unquote contact balance. That's like the cliche word that everybody uses on social media and the scouting community now. But, you have a lot of experience with John Dorsey, who's with the Detroit Lions now, a very highly respectable executive in the league. So from your experience with Dorsey and then in some of these other draft rooms, just go over maybe a couple characteristics or traits that Dorsey looked for in a running back when you were in draft rooms.
Sure. I think, of course, the ball security is something that's very important. I mean, if he runs with great eyes and feet, if the eyes and feet marry, if he runs with a very good base and leverage in the run game, and then just seeing if his style of running fits the current team's offense. Is he a downhill guy? Is he an east-west guy? I mean, is he a one-cut and go back? I think that those things are things you look for as far as being able to project his ability in that particular team's offense. And then, of course, on passing downs, can he pass pro? I mean, because there are guys that can go out on third downs, that can run routes, and some guys can catch, but they're not really great at pass pro. So pass protection is something that you look for in the passing game, as well as his ability to catch. So I think that those two things and his production as a receiver on passing downs, I think those are things you look for in a back on passing downs to be able to predict if he's going to be effective in the National Football League in passing situations.
For sure. And I'm really interested to see how this running back class does turn out, just because I think it's different from last year where we knew we had those two top dogs and Etienne and then Najee Harris, 2 first-round picks. This year, I don't get that same kind of excitement or explosiveness from this class, just because we Isaiah Spiller, and we'll talk about Breece Hall here in a second. But I just don't see first-round players in either one of those guys right now. I may be wrong about that come season end, but I just don't see 2 first-round caliber of running backs right now. Now, day 2, I definitely think, of course, they will go there. But I think this is a situation of where, like, how we saw the run with Kellen Mond, Davis Mills, and Kyle Trask. Once Kyle Trask went at the end of the second round, we saw Kellen Mond come off the board, and then Davis Mills right after that. I think it's going to be very similar with this running back class, of where one team takes one, and then everybody else says, oh, man, let's go ahead and get our guy too. So I think it's going to be similar fashion. I always find that intriguing of where you see the runs from maybe not just running back, from different positions as well. We always see it at those premium positions, like we always talk about. Like you always say, you better get your offensive tackle early, just because the hit rate with those guys outside of, let's say, the second or third round is not very good.
You bring up a very good point, though. I agree. Totally agree.
Let's go ahead to Breece Hall, running back from Iowa State, 6'0", 215. He's a true junior coming into this year. I mean, set the record books on fire ever since he's been starting there. Really interesting player, and we talked about him quite a bit in our scouting meeting the other day, just because he's a player that's getting a lot of love right now, but he does have some holes in his game, just like any other prospect. But he's one that I think a lot of people are going to be split on, just because of there's some value at the position, and it just really depends on what type of flavor that you want from him. So I watched him against Louisiana Lafayette in the season opener, Kansas, TCU, and then also Texas Tech. And one thing that I noticed about him is that he really only runs from one platform. And what I mean by that is, so you get running backs like Adrian Peterson. He was really only good from what's called the dot, so the I formation, 7 yards deep. You have some running backs that are good from the offset, but Breece Hall is best when he's in the pistol. So you have your quarterback that's 5 yards deep in the shotgun, and then he's 2 to 3 yards directly behind him. And that's really where he thrives. And he's an outside zone extraordinaire. And 189 of his 270 were outside zone runs or runs outside tackles. And he had 1,567 yards last year. 1,049 of those came off tackle. So what that tells me is that he's much more comfortable running off the hip of the tackle of where he can come downhill and really pick and choose where he wants to go, as opposed to keeping his shoulder square, coming downhill, running in between the tackles, and not really having to make those quick split-second decisions, just because we know in between the tackles, a lot goes on, and you can get busy in there just because there's so much things going on. But those off-tackle runs, you can be a little bit more patient. You can stick your foot in the ground and go when you want to, when you see it. So what are some things you saw from Breece Hall? What are some things you liked about him? And then what are some questions you have about him?
Sure. I think that Breece was very similar in certain aspects to Isaiah Spiller. I thought that Breece was someone who was very productive in short yardage situations. I thought he ran with good footwork and vision, runs with good instincts. But I thought he had a ton of clear air production, in terms of his production. I thought he got good yardage after contact. More of the issues that I had with him is that I didn't think he run behind his pads much, and he doesn't necessarily run with physicality. I thought he lacked some elusiveness in space. He's somebody that will not create something from nothing. He's not necessarily a great decision maker as a runner. I thought he lacked speed to consistently get to the edge against edge players in the National Football League. He had a lot of clear air production, and really at the end of the day, this could be somebody who really thrives in a two-down situation in the National Football League. But I would certainly love to see him take a step very similar to Isaiah. I would love to see him take a step in the passing game this coming up year and prove that this is someone who can legitimately play on all three downs.
So there's two teams I'm hoping really make the college football playoff this year. One of them is Iowa State and the other is Cincinnati. And for selfish reasons, I want to see Desmond Ridder play a big-time opponent in the college football playoff, the quarterback from Cincinnati. But Iowa State, I want to see Breece Hall go against a Alabama or Ohio State or a Clemson, just because I have huge questions about him in between the tackles. And we know you're not going to be able to consistently run outside those teams just because they have speed to match it into the edge. So I want to see him play a little bit more consistent in between the tackles. And I think you hit it right on the spot with that clear air stuff, especially against Kansas. We know Kansas is not a very good football team by any stretch of the imagination. Louisiana Lafayette, they had a really good defense last year. They're going to have a really good one next year, but he was able to have some success in that game, even though they lost. And then those Big 12 defenses, we know you're just not going to get a whole bunch from them. And you play in those wide open boxes. Like he's playing against 5- and 6-man boxes just because offenses are so explosive in that conference. So you're not ever going to get teams that, going to play 7, 8-man in the box. And that makes a huge difference just because I love the term clear air, the runs that you're talking about with him, just because, 5-6 yards down the field, he's not even getting touched, which is why he's not able he's just not used to seeing those guys in his face right away. That's why I think he's had so much success with those off-tackle runs. And we know Matt Campbell's going to do what's working. So he's going to consistently run those off-tackle runs. That's why I'm hoping that Iowa State does play in the college football playoff so we can see him against the likes of these big-time defense that's going to have that speed to match him getting to the edge. Right.
And I think that too, and I was about to say this earlier with regards to Isaiah, I think it's going to be interesting when you incorporate the devaluing of the position, and these guys clearly have question marks, particularly in a passing game and it being a passing league. So it will be very interesting to see how the league values those two things this coming up season. So
yeah, we saw him very similarly. And my one-liner about him, I said Breece Hall is an upright and flat-footed runner that doesn't display much of a turbo button, has a lot of easy alleyways as far as outside zone runs, but does have the short area quickness in order to make guys miss once he's able to build up a head of steam. And he's not as big as this guy coming out, and this guy ran 4.3 coming out. But I think as far as what he is right now, the name that I wrote down was Latavius Murray. He reminds me a lot of him as far as that upright build, that upright chisel build. Doesn't really have much of a turbo button, but is very effective, really strong runner with his contact balance, and really good with his ball security. I was really impressed with that. When he goes in a crowd, he puts two hands over it, and then he runs the gauntlet. That's what I like to call it. He gets some of those extra yardage as well. So did you have anything else to add on Breece Hall?
No. I think that those two names are the guys that are often mentioned at the top of the draft. They both clearly have some questions to answer. So can't wait for season to start, man, and see what they do.
Did you have any notes on them in Pass Pro? I had a couple of them. I'm gonna see if we saw them similar in that fashion.
In Pass Pro, not a lot. No, I didn't have much with him in Pass Pro.
So I said he's successful with doing it. He's not scared to throw his body around, but doesn't use much technique right now, which is great. I can work with that. A guy that is willing and he has the intensity to step in there and protect the quarterback. I think he's really good with scanning and seeing his assignments as well, which shows that he knows what's going on in Pass Pro as well. He's not a guy that's looking to cut everybody or take somebody's knees out. You see that often with the linebacker. So I thought that was a really good note to add.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Did you have anything else to add? Okay. Good. Yeah, absolutely. A bit of a shorter episode today, guys, but we're going to get to some more running backs here on the later show this week. We haven't really decided who we're going to do yet, but we will make sure to relay that to you guys in the next episode when we get to that. So once again, as always, Dre, I appreciate you, man. You always accept my crazy ideas with the NHL expansion draft, putting you on the spot. With that, but I always love talking ball with you. I always learn something new from you, just like the clear airway stuff. I'm definitely writing that one down to put stash away my little scouting notebook. So I appreciate you guys. I'm Jordan Reid. He's Drae Harris. Thank you guys for listening to the Reid Option Podcast. We will be back on Friday to discuss some more running backs to round out this portion of our summer scouting series. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure to subscribe, leave a 5-star review. See you guys on Friday.